The idea of death is central to Bleach and has always played a massive role in both the story and the world. However, Bleach is brought to life thanks to its impossibly creative and colourful cast of characters. And as a series with both a lot of characters and a lot of fighting, it stands to reason that Bleach is absolutely full of impactful death scenes, many of which delivered a fitting capstone to a character's development and journey. Across the arcs, many heroes and villains fall in battle, and today I want to celebrate some of the series' most powerful, most emotional, or just downright most brutal character death scenes we've ever seen. I've got 10 here, as well as a few honourable mentions to get through, so let's get to it. There wasn't much of a criterion here. These death scenes made it on the list because they're my favourites for a variety of reasons. As always, I'd love to hear your favourites down in the comments. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video when you're done with it, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well to help support me and the channel. And if you want to take the support from me another step further, I do also have a Patreon as well. And as always, I want to give an enormous shout out and say a huge thank you to each and every one of you supporting me over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you all so very much. And yes, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. So before we kick off the list for real, I've got some honourable mentions that I think deserve a moment's recognition. Two of them are gut-wrenchingly emotional, evocative, and powerful scenes depicting the absolute total downfall of a beloved character at the end of their arc. However, the reason they're only honourable mentions is fairly simple: the characters don't actually die. Despite seemingly coming close to the brink, Kubo never quite tips them over into oblivion, and so as much as I do love these scenes, they can't go any further than this. And so up first is the regression of Sajin Komamura as he succumbs to his lust for revenge. In a sense, this is a death scene. The idea of Komamura himself, the man we once knew him to be, dies before our very eyes here. Having ripped out his heart to acquire the power necessary to destroy Yhwach, Komamura collapses to the ground, his new human form reverting to that of a mindless beast, driven only by an insatiable thirst for revenge. As his grandfather delivers him a sinister eulogy from the shadows, Komamura undergoes a monstrous transformation, all semblance of his humanity stripped from him before he falls to the ground in sad remorse. It's a brutal scene of penance and the end of the character's life as we know it. Now, of course, I'd love to get more from Komamura in the future. Hopefully the anime can maybe bring him back where the source material seemed to totally forget him. But either way, it felt like a fitting and very impactful end to the Komamura that we knew. Next in our honourable mentions is a scene that at one point felt almost certainly like it would be a death scene, and that's of course Byakuya's last stand during the first Quincy invasion. Now here's the funny thing about this one: if Kubo had committed to killing Byakuya here, it would probably make #1 on my list. It's that good. Never before had the loss of a Shinigami felt so total, so complete, so despairing. As Byakuya is ruthlessly shredded to pieces by his stolen bankai, the pain on Renji's face and in his voice is tough to watch, before he too is defeated in a barbaric fashion. As Byakuya sinks into the stone wall, he apologises to Renji and Rukia as his Zanpakuto breaks in two. But that's not all. As the Soul Society veers on the edge of annihilation, Ichigo returns, and amidst the pitter-patter of the rain, he has one final conversation with a dying Byakuya. The captain's character arc comes full circle in a wonderful way here. The steadfast stalwart of Soul Society law and authority, who once stood as a brazen counter to Ichigo's own ideals, now begs the human to save them as tears fall from his eyes. Ichigo doesn't say anything in response, but as Byakuya gazes into the sky, he's content now to leave it all to him. It's absolutely perfect, and like I said, if Byakuya had died here as his Zanpakuto disintegrates into dust, I think it would be my #1 pick for sure. The next honourable mention on our list does feature an actual death, would you believe it? And I'll admit to a bit of bias here as well, but I love this death scene just as much as I love the character himself. Urahara is finally able to get the upper hand on Askin thanks to a clever team-up with Grimjaw, using his bankai to enable the Espada to sneak up behind the sternritter. And what follows is one of the most shockingly brutal deaths in Bleach. Grimjaw punches his arm through Askin's back, his clawed hand bursting from his enemy's chest, the Quincy's heart gripped in Grimjaw's claws. Grimjaw destroys Askin's heart, and the battle is won. But not before Askin leaves them with a parting gift, as his gift ball deluxe forces both Kisuke and Grimjaw to their knees, the air suddenly thick with a dangerous poison. I love a lot about this death. It's cathartic, it's satisfying, and I appreciate the no-nonsense approach a lot. Unlike his Schutzstaffel counterparts, Askin is mostly just a regular human, so this is it for him. He is not getting back up again, and that's refreshing. But I also love how, even in death, he wanted to spare his enemies. And I love that even as his bankai collapses around him and Urahara falls to the floor, blood spewing from his mouth, he has a backup plan, as Nell watches the commotion unfold from afar. It's just a great ending to a great character and to a great battle, soured a little by the fact we never see any of these characters again, inexplicably. The last honourable mention on our list features another actual death, and this one works on various levels. I love the creative and clever way Hachi manages to defeat Baragon, turning his own absolute power against him in a way that makes total sense. Hachi severs his own rotting arm with Kido, transporting the decaying limb inside Baragon himself. The Espada is then killed, destroyed from the inside out by his own power in a really cool display of intelligence and Kido proficiency. Plus, it's a great showing for a character who otherwise goes very underrepresented in the story. There's more to it than just a neat death, though. As we get a glimpse into the King of Wako Mundo's past, we see how Aizen took advantage of him, manipulating him into losing his entire kingdom. And so in one last-ditch effort, Baragon launches his axe at Aizen, attempting to kill his new master, but the axe simply explodes, shattering, turning to ash mid-flight, disappearing without so much as a word from Aizen himself. As Baragon's crown then falls to the ground, those around him lament the loss of the God King of the Hollows. For a villain who really was just a straight-up two-dimensional bad guy for the most part, comically arrogant and cruel, it's a surprisingly sedate ending, emphasising the futility of servitude under Aizen, and perhaps the ultimate futility of Hollows in general. But with our honourable mentions out of the way, let's move on to the list itself. So, starting off the list, we have one of the few Shinigami deaths in the series, that of Yachiru Unohana. After training Kenpachi Zaraki for the last 3 days, Unohana finally achieves her goal. Zaraki's self-imposed shackles are released, and his latent potential unlocked at last. He drives his blade through Unohana's throat, ending the battle. For starters, the imagery here is stunning. Zaraki's last fatal strike brings the two of them together, putting an end to their dance for good. Nothing but a pure white background behind them to emphasise the finality of his attack. Zaraki as well is uncharacteristically emotional in this moment, tossing his sword aside in a rare display of sadness and defeat. He may have won the fight, but this isn't the outcome he wanted. Conversely though, this is what Unohana desired. As she drops her bloodied sword to the floor, that same blood finally washes from her hands as she's at long last able to pass on the torch, the title and lineage of Kenpachi living on. It's a beautiful moment. The reason it comes in at number 10 for me is simply because I wish it didn't happen. I don't think Unohana should have been killed here, and I would have loved to have seen more of her in the 1000-Year Blood War arc. I still think it would have been easy enough for Kubo to say that the persona of Yachiru died for good here, allowing Unohana to put that behind her forever, but alas, maybe we'll see her again in the potential Hell arc. Next up, we have another death scene from the 1000-Year Blood War arc. Sternritter F. The Fear Asnod's defeat at the hands of Rukia Kuchiki and her incredible, majestic bankai. After Byakuya humiliates him, Asnod transforms into an eldritch behemoth, a monolithic embodiment of gruesome innate fear itself, declaring that the end is near. Byakuya, however, has reserved one last stinging barb for his Quincy opponent, however, telling the sternritter that despite their history, he is leaving his foe in Rukia's capable hands. Byakuya's acknowledgement of Rukia's strength is long overdue and wonderfully laid bare here. With her brother's encouragement, Rukia faces down her enemy with no fear left in her heart. Activating Bankai, Rukia engulfs the battlefield in a crystalline white glow, revealing her stunning transformation as she becomes a glittering queen of ice. And meanwhile, Asnod is left to wallow in his own terror. When faced with his oncoming doom, we're treated to a rare piece of humanization for a sternritter, seeing a sickly Asnod bedridden and teetering on the edge of death in the past. As his body is frozen to its very core, Asnod crumbles to pieces in the wake of Haka no Togame, and as Rukia almost destroys herself by trying to disengage her Bankai too quickly, Byakuya steps in, and the two of them share a tender, well-deserved moment together as he helps Rukia breathe, their spectre finally put to rest. I might not have got my wish to hear Nightmare play during this scene in the anime, but it was still pretty perfect there as well, a testament to how incredible this death scene actually is. Okay, finally moving away from the 1000-Year Blood War arc, briefly we have the death of the 5th Espada Neutra Gilga at the tail end of the Waco Mundo arc. Neutra is a fascinating character and someone I really should talk about more on the channel. For such a reprehensible, villainous character, Kubo goes into a surprising amount of depth with him. His relationship and rivalry with Nell is a huge part of both of their characters, as they represent both sides of the hollow coin. The possibility for civility and intelligence, and an unquenchable lust for battle and strength. And in the end, Neutra gets what he wants. To die in bloody battle, his life having left his body before he hits the ground. I always loved seeing Neutra continue to get back up, even after having his body dismantled by Zaraki throughout their fight over and over again. And in the end, Zaraki grants him the death he desires, the two of them grinning right through to the final moment. Neutra crumples to his knees, but there's a smile creasing his lips. And as he falls, time seeming to slow, he locks eyes with Nell one last time before buckling over and dying. I always loved that final shot of Neutra falling, his scythes embedded in the ground all around him. It feels very final, as though Kubo is putting a cap on this character once and for all. To top it all off, Kenpachi delivers Neutra the highest honour for a warrior in death. He remembers his name. Did Neutra deserve to get the ending he hoped for? Perhaps not, but it's an excellent one all the same. Towards the end of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, Kubo surprised us with an emotional gut punch in the form of Hashwolf and Basby's shocking history together. While many of the Sternritter weren't afforded much in the way of sympathy or humanity, these two suddenly bucked that trend, giving us the biggest emotional send-off for any of the Vandenreich Quincy. As it's revealed that Basby and Hashwolf grew up together in the shadow of Yhwach's nascent empire, Basby challenges Hashwolf in the present day. Hashwolf, who has seemingly forsaken everything to be by Yhwach's side, is left to put down his unrelenting former friend as Basby pushes him to the brink for his perceived betrayal. With one final attack, Basby is cut down by Hashwolf, who ultimately defeats him with ease. Blood erupting from his shoulder, Basby turns to Hashwolf slowly, crumpling, grabbing Hashwolf's coat to keep himself from collapsing to the ground for just a moment. I love the little details here. The fire in Basby's hands, singeing Hashwolf's outfit as he grapples with the folds of it, for example, is so lovely. Hashwolf says nothing. In many ways, this is the ultimate point of no return for this character, and I wish we'd seen how it affected him more than we did, although it comes full circle nicely at the end of Hashwolf's own arc. Regardless, Basby admits that finally losing to Hashwolf didn't hurt as much as he anticipated, before falling to the floor. As Hashwolf silently leaves, Basby thinks back to their earliest meeting, before closing his eyes and dying. It's touching, it's somber, and best of all, it's unexpected. Perhaps that is what keeps it, though, from reaching higher on this list. It almost feels like it comes out of nowhere. But still, it's a moving moment of respite from the battles against the Schutzstaffel in the final stretch of the story, and some much needed humanity for the sternritter. Last week I made a video looking at the most terrifying abilities in Bleach, and well, one of them translates over into an amazing morbid death scene as well. When Xyloporo accidentally ingests Mayuri's superhuman drug, he's subjected to a fate perhaps even worse than death itself. As the world seems to slow to a crawl around the Espada, Mayuri reveals the sinister truth. The superhuman drug now flowing through Xyloporo's veins heightens his reflexes massively, replicating the sensation two experienced swordsmen feel in combat, but on an enormous scale. Now trapped inside his own mind as time slows down around him, Xyloporo can only watch in abject horror as every second feels like 100 years dragging before his very eyes. The Espada's actual death is fairly quick. Mayuri simply pierces Xyloporo's outstretched hand before pushing the blade through into his enemy's heart. But to Xyl, the mere act of being stabbed takes centuries, millennia to register. It's absolutely terrifying. What's over in a matter of moments for Mayuri lasts a staggeringly long time for Xyl, and I love the insight you get into his mind, where he sees himself now as a withered old man, unsure even of how much time has passed at this point, and he truly just wants to die. When that blade does finally pierce his heart, Xyl's suffering comes to a merciful end, until he finds himself in hell, that is. I'm not the world's biggest fan of Mayuri vs Xyloporo as an actual battle, but there's no denying how incredible a death scene this is, really putting the terror of Mayuri on full display. Kicking off the top 5 on this list, we have the death of Ginjo Kugo from the Lost Agent arc. I feel like Ginjo's final battle with Ichigo flies under the radar for a lot of people, but it really is one of the best fights in the series. Two sides of the same coin, brothers who ended up on different paths. Ichigo and Ginjo clash in the skies above Karakura Town, Ichigo's new bankai versus Ginjo's stolen powers. And their fight culminates in Ichigo cutting Ginjo down for his own good, the first substitute Shinigami on a murderous rampage driven by unstoppable revenge. As the two of them come together for the final time in a wordless exchange, Ichigo cuts Ginjo's sword in half, and the man collapses to one knee, blood spraying from his chest, his time up at last. Ginjo's final struggle is portrayed beautifully. In small, incremental panels, Kubo details the physicality of his last moments. As Ginjo falls to the floor, he tries to rise once again, pushing himself up with one arm, only to crash back down with a hefty thud, the life leaving his eyes as he resigns himself to his fate. Ichigo gazes down at him. There's no victory in his expression, just a sorrowful understanding. Although Ichigo puts an end to Ginjo, the two of them have a connection. Ichigo did what he had to do, and Ginjo is left to wonder if Ichigo would have found himself in the same spot had their positions been reversed. It's an excellent end to a divisive arc, but in my opinion this is one of the most satisfying defeats in all of Bleach. It's just a shame that tease of Ginjo's past never went anywhere. Position number 4 on the list brings us right back to the Soul Society arc, and technically even earlier than that. Kaien Shiba's death is awesome, as there's really nothing else quite like it in the series. It's a horrific, traumatic event that totally shapes Rukia's character. It helps her to grow, but it also holds her back, lingering in her mind forevermore. In a flashback, Kaien hunts down the hollow that murdered his wife. His captain Ukitake allows him to fight it alone. Although Kaien gets the upper hand, the hollow possesses him, taking over his body and turning him into a crazed, unrecognisable fiend. With Rukia's life suddenly in danger as the superior she so adored lunges at her, Ukitake steps in and Rukia desperately runs. However, the now monstrous Kaien escapes Ukitake, and Rukia, who foolishly returned to the scene, maybe with a glimmer of hope that Kaien could still be saved, is forced to face him down as Ukitake screams at her to kill him. Although Rukia seems to be helpless before him, like a deer caught in headlights, her sword suddenly dangling by her side, in a flash, Kaien is impaled on her blade, his body slumped over hers. As Kaien thanks Ukitake for letting him fight, the rain begins to pour, drenching the scene, mingling with Rukia's tears as Kaien passes away, leaving his heart with her. It's emotional storytelling in Bleach at its best. It's raw, savage, and unrelenting. And we didn't even really know Kaien all that well. But the impact it has on Rukia is palpable and everlasting, and it comes full circle in an incredible way when she faces down Aronniero in the Urankar arc. Coming in at number 3 on the list, we have the death of Gin Ichimaru at the end of the Deicide arc. I remember the absolute furor around Gin's death, how it was so incredibly powerful, and yet no one wanted it to be real. Mere snippets of Gin's history and motivation are revealed, but they're enough to tell a complete story of love, devotion, and cold-blooded vengeance. Nothing is more important to Gin than his earliest days of growing up with Matsumoto in the bleak world of the Rukongai, where it was simply them against everyone else, but he hides it all beneath a sneering veneer of fox-like wryness. After Aizen's minions attacked Matsumoto, shaving away parts of her soul to feed his Hogyoku, Gin sets his master plan into motion that would stretch the span of numerous years. Centuries later, Gin finally attempts to kill Aizen and very nearly succeeds, but as Aizen himself says, the Hogyoku is now way beyond Gin's comprehension. A newly transformed Aizen then tears Gin apart, tossing his former right-hand man through a building where he lies defeated at the foot of this now angelic figure. As Matsumoto returns, tears now flooding her eyes, streaming down her face, Gin apologises again for not being able to get back what Aizen stole from her, calling back to his departure from the Soul Society. As Matsumoto sobs over his body, however, Ichigo returns and the final piece of the puzzle is slotted into place. Through barely open, cracked eyes, Gin sees the change in Ichigo, how he's grown into a truly powerful warrior, how he's in a completely different space to when they fought earlier. Finally at peace, Gin acknowledges Ichigo is at last ready, and he slips away with the reassurance that Ichigo can finish what he started. It's wonderfully sad, and a beautiful end to a tragic character. Our runner-up for the best death scene in Bleach comes courtesy once again of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Yamamoto's death had been fairly well telegraphed by Kubo for a while by this point. The head captain's control was slipping, and faced with the death of his beloved vice-captain Chojiro and the resurgent Quincy Empire he failed to destroy, the ancient Shinigami seemed to be on a path of self-destruction, a war path, where he unleashed his bankai against Yhwach in a fit of explosive rage. However, as the fires let up, and the rain began to fall on the Seirete, Yhwach's deception was revealed. Yamamoto had been duped into using up his full strength. And once Yhwach successfully steals Yamamoto's bankai, a withered old Yamamoto appears as a mere shadow of his former self, as he seems all but ready to die. Lowering his weapon, Yamamoto can do nothing but stand tall as he's struck down, Yhwach slicing him from shoulder to hip. In my opinion, Chapter 511 will forever go down in history as one of the greatest Bleach chapters of all time. Opening with a mysterious look into Yamamoto's past, we see that as far as he was concerned, if he ever had to use bankai again in the Seirete, it likely meant he wouldn't be making it out the other side, and how right he was. It was absolutely jaw-dropping turning the page and seeing Yamamoto's body actually split in half, the all-powerful Captain Commander's head and shoulders falling to the floor in a bloody pool, while his legs remained standing in defiance, a testament to his mantra outlined in the poem of Volume 45, vowing to die standing on his feet. The immense feeling of loss in this scene is compounded by the usually cool and collected Kyoraku suddenly screaming out, sensing the impossible death of his father figure at the hands of Yhwach. More than anything, I think loss is the best way to describe this scene. Yamamoto is dead, the bastion of Soul Society history, but the Soul Society has lost more in this moment than just its figurehead and leader. Yamamoto's death signifies they've lost this battle entirely, the rain lashing down upon them as Yhwach callously puts his boot to Yamamoto's head before obliterating his body completely. And with the death of Yamamoto signals the death of the Soul Society as well, as they suffer a defeat the likes of which we had never seen before. But my number one pick for the best death scene in Bleach remains the same as it did when I made the original version of this video 3 years ago. For me, Ulquiorra's death remains not only an emotional high point of the entire series, but also completely iconic. In fact, it's strangely ironic that the statuesque, emotionless Espada would have one of the most beautiful and heart-wrenching death scenes in Bleach, but that reinforces what an arc the villain had in the end. After Zangetsu's terrifying rampage ends with him about to kill Uryu with a Sero, Ulquiorra himself completely eviscerated, his body barely able to hold itself together anymore, leaps into the fray again for one last surprise attack, severing Zangetsu's horn and releasing Ichigo from his instinctual nightmare. Although Ulquiorra seems ready to keep fighting, his body has other ideas. Suddenly his wing turns to dust behind him and he realises this is the end. For as all-encompassing, climactic and epic Ichigo vs Ulquiorra is, what I love about it is that it ends in silence. The damage has been done by this point. The battle atop the dome has been one of the darkest, most hard-hitting, bleakest sequences in Bleach, a true descent into the blackness of Hollow-dom and back out again, and all characters involved are feeling the effects. Ulquiorra asks Ichigo to finish him off, but even now Ichigo doesn't act as he expects him to, and the Espada realises in his last moments that he was beginning to take an interest in the humans after all. Maybe they're not as different as he initially felt. Reaching out to Orihime in one of Bleach's most memorable scenes ever, he asks if she's still afraid of him, and Orihime says no, nothing but sadness in her eyes. As she tries to touch his hand, Ulquiorra completely vanishes, turning to dust and softly blowing away on the winds of Hueco Mundo. It's a testament to this scene that nothing that followed in the Arrancar arc would really manage to live up to it. As we've seen on this list, really only Gin's death comes close. As I said at the start of this video, perhaps the strongest aspect of Bleach is its incredible cast of characters, many of whom we as readers have formed strong emotional attachments to. Seeing them leave the story potentially forever is never easy, but Kubo is a master of incredible, often brutal death scenes, and in my opinion, these were the very best. Alright, but that's it for the video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. You no longer have to listen to my sickly, croaking voice anymore, but I really wanted to put out a video for you guys nonetheless. Let me know, of course, what you thought of my list. Do you agree with what I think are the best death scenes in Bleach? Did I miss any that you would have included here? Maybe something like Stark, somebody like that. There are a few death scenes that were close to making the cut, but just didn't quite make it over the line. Regardless, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already for more Bleach like this every single week. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and until next time, guys, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.